Well, you might have heard about the soap opera that is OpenAI, the most talked about startup of the year, and the creator behind ChatGPT went through a dramatic few days. Last Friday, the CEO and co-founder Sam Altman was fired by a board that, based on concerns some of the small board members apparently had, was tied to the risks of pushing too fast on the corporate side with a technology that could have big society risks. Well, investor and employee backlash, not to mention pressure from Microsoft, its big partner, seemed to bring Altman back to the CEO position. That announcement came just a couple of days ago. But now the board is also being reshaped. And since this remains a nonprofit and for-profit venture, with the world watching closely, what are some of the considerations for OpenAI? Well, let's get some perspective from Richard Leblanc. He is a professor of governance law and ethics at York University. First of all, Richard, nice to see you. What did you make of this wild week at one of the most closely watched growing companies in the world?
Well, I have never seen a founder dismissed on a Friday afternoon like that. And I think part of the issue governance-wise is we have an anomalous, irregular board structure because, as you said, OpenAI is trying to commingle not-for-profit with for-profit. And what that means is you have an unelected, unaccountable board without investors sitting on the board. Microsoft, for example, does not have a board seat. The founder does not have a board seat. The founder does not have founder shares. And normally in a startup, it's purely for profit, and the founder, and I'll give Google or Meta as an example, it's not possible to fire the founder, and we want something like that because you're investing in the founder. So Altman did not have shares, employees did not have shares, investors did not sit on the board. It was a very small board that I think got ahead of itself and misjudged the support that the founder had.
Now, just to be clear about what happens from here, what our colleagues at Bloomberg and others have reported is that you have the reshaping of a board that will largely not include previous board members outside of one. So basically another co-founder and two other board members who I guess, and we don't know the exact specifics here, but we're concerned about some of these ethical issues, perhaps about the use of AI technology and using it too quickly. They're gone. A former Treasury Secretary and Larry Summers has stepped in. You have a former co-CEO of Salesforce, Brett Taylor, who, for those who might be familiar with other boardroom drama, was chairing Twitter, now X, before Elon Musk's acquisition of that business. That is the starting point, along with Adam D'Angelo, who was already on the board. But now there's talk that it maybe gets extended to a board of 9, and maybe Microsoft's got a stake on there, and maybe Altman himself is on the board. But with the world watching and this remaining to be a company that's supposed to be, yes, chasing growth and profit, but also being responsible, what goes into the decisions on who's actually on that board from here?
Well, I think it's a good start. You're beefing up your experience. You're beefing up the number of directors. I think you rapidly need to go to a more traditional board structure, which is a board of 9, as you said. I think investors should be on the board. I think the CEO should be on the board. I think you want to use traditional board committees. And I think OpenAI should pivot a little bit away from the charitable aspect and more into the for-profit aspect. In America, John, it's shareholder wealth maximization, and American companies, tech companies in particular, are very good at chasing growth. What America may not be good at is regulation. So I think by trying to commingle regulation and for-profit in one company, I think that's where OpenAI made a governance misstep. They brought on an anomalous structure with a very small board. So the more traditional they can become in governance sooner rather than later, and leave the regulation for regulators. We have President Biden that's come out with an executive order. I think regulators are all over the world are seized with artificial intelligence and the negative ethical and safety implications that can occur. And regulators should regulate, and companies should pursue growth. Once you start commingling, you're asking for trouble because you haven't done this. I've not seen an American company that's tried to do both, and I think that's part of the problem.
And, maybe because Sam Altman, who's been in Silicon Valley for a while, but never had the spotlight that he's had over the last year, who became quite good at dancing between the opportunity and explaining to people what ChatGPT could represent, but also being mindful of some of the risks. He's an eloquent speaker, and people kept asking for more and more and more of him. And then, to your point, maybe he's not the person that we're supposed to be turning to on the regulatory front. I did want to ask you, before we let you go, about Microsoft, because just a piece that we haven't quite explained to our audience is Microsoft invested boatloads into OpenAI. Microsoft quickly, through their CEO, decided that they would hire Sam Altman as a new place for him to land. And then employees started to threaten that they would go and work with Altman at Microsoft, which put pressure on the previous board. But, Microsoft enjoyed a bit of autonomy in the sense that they could be connected to this story, but be somewhat at arm's length, even though they have a large stake in the for-profit side. What if you were advising them now on whether they should actually have representation on the board, or let's say something comes out down the road about something behind the scenes that maybe they were moving too quickly on over at OpenAI. What should Microsoft do, in your opinion?
Well, I think, they've invested $13 billion. I think they should have representation on the board to protect their investment. However, Microsoft's concern is that their open platform, Azure, they don't want to be accused of regulators to be overly influential. But I think you can sit on a board, you can protect your investment, you can acknowledge that you have Azure and you have a conflict of interest, and I think you can handle that. So I think for-profit companies handle conflicts reasonably well, but I don't think it's a reason not to sit on a board. Microsoft, it came as a surprise that Altman was dismissed. So this inexperienced board fired the CEO without consulting with a major shareholder. The major shareholder, John, should be in the room. So I think Microsoft should exert its influence on reforming governance and on having investors on that board. Absolutely.
I'm sorry, we're almost out of time, but I'm just so curious, real quickly, how quickly, if they're going to make this a 9-person board, how quickly do they have to get there?
I think, over the next 2-3 months, certainly by first quarter 24, they should have a full bench of experienced, credible, reputable directors, including shareholder representation. I don't think that's asking too much. The next 2 or 3 months.